Oh, we are up. Happy, amazing day to you, friends. Coach Eric here. And on today's call, I want to position an idea for you guys that is probably the greatest health hack and health component you could ever focus on. And that is enhancing your sleep, which in turn enhances your recovery. So we're joined by Dr. Bob Rakowski. We are really going to go in a little deeper on this conversation with you this week. You're going to learn things about what is a deeper phase of sleep. What is the impact of really great sleep on not only your performance if you're an athlete, but also your cognitive performance as you go about your daily tasks? Because if you're underslept, you can literally be a ticking time bomb for accidents or just not performing at your highest level. So there are a number of things we want to help you to accomplish on this call. First of all is, how do we improve your sleep? What are some of the things you can apply right now to be able to enhance that sleep? And more importantly, what are these things that you can solidify your sleep schedule moving forward? So Dr. Bob, I want to welcome you to the call. Always great to have you on these calls. You've been educating people not only on their sleep, but on their performance over the last 34 plus years. So I'd love you just to, first of all, just maybe get you to make an adjustment on cam here. So we're not on unequal heights there. There we go. Perfect. But tell us, Dr. Bob, you've been in clinical practice 34, going on 35 years, work with some of the most elite athletes like Evander Holyfield, Tyson Gay, Yao Ming, Bianca Knight, some of these elites of athletes, but also people who are sent home to die by the medical model. And all of those individuals have similar challenges than we do, and is how do we sleep better and how do we recover better? So I'd love you just to share what you've experienced over your 3+ decades in clinical practice, Dr. Bob, when it comes to recovery and sleep on this particular topic.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I'm going to quote Charles Poliquin right to start it right off the bat. And, Charles and I lectured around the world. He was known as the most successful strength and conditioning coach, having trained Olympic medalists in 17 different sports. And his simple quote is this: nothing gets you more bang for your buck than sleep. Any investment you make in your health is, really undermined by poor sleep or enhanced by ideal sleep. Now, I didn't say only focus on sleep, but don't ever miss that one. If you miss the most important one, you're going to suffer. And as we talk through this, I think people are going to realize, wait a minute, this really does need to be a priority. The data is pretty clear. You already led into it in the intro. You're more prone to accidents. You're more prone to heart attack. You're more prone to chronic illness. Your life is shorter. Short sleep, short life. And that's what Matthew Walker, probably the world's greatest sleep researcher, is saying. That's the simple summary: short sleep, short life. So invest in yourself by getting good sleep.
And it has to be a priority, it really does. And when we start looking at the health benefits, first of all, because we want to show you the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the yin and the yang of the whole equation, guys, because some people aren't motivated by benefits, but they are motivated by deficits or the fear of something happening. So we want to be real with you and give you some of the pointers on this. If you're checking the list here, guys, the benefits straight out the bat, Dr. Bob, I'd love you just to go through some of these and what you've seen to be really prevalent in your clinical practice when you start to make these little changes for better sleep with your patients.
Well, let's start with the immune system. We need to have that ideally functional and ideally regulated. And by the way, you can have an overimmune reaction, autoimmunity, and or allergy. Sleep aggravates the overfunction, and then underfunction, infection, or the worst case scenario is actually cancer. And statistically, we all create 500 plus cancer cells every day, or actually just 99.9% of us. And if you let that immune system slip, you might get yourself into a crisis that you don't want to be. So they list immune at number one. And then memory. This is new data where they actually put people under functional MRIs, and they looked, okay, if we deprive these people of sleep, only 4 hours a night, and only took one night, they could not form long-lasting memories. It was impossible for them to learn anything in a sleep-deprived state. And by the way, if you can't form new memory, I have to wonder, is it also people having more challenges recalling? And I bet in time, they're going to figure out that too, even memories that are long-term held in place. When you start talking about body composition, and for those that are looking at the graphic that are part of our Facebook community, This is the organ that they have them listed, and they have the top 10 per their list. But I promise you it's way more than 10, but it's great for metabolism. And let me just take a step to say, if you're not running on rest and recovery, you're running on stress hormones. And when you're under stress, the immune system is shut down. Believe it or not, initially under high stress, you'll form memories because we want to know if we're in a really grave circumstance. We want to remember that for the future. But if that goes on too long, those memories go away. And high cortisol destroys the hippocampus, the memory center. Body composition, sleep distress, sleep deprivation, stress hormones, break down lean, increase fat by over a dozen different mechanisms. Then you go into sex drive, you're either making stress hormones or sex hormones. If you don't have those, you're not going to be fertile. You're going to die early. The stress hormones oppose the action of insulin. We just keep going on and on and on. And bottom line is, if you're not sleeping, you're taking steps towards a bad life and a short life. So make it a priority, like you said. And when I was young and foolish, I had mentors that would say, yeah, you can sleep when you're dead. And I went months on end drinking 2 pots of coffee a day. And God, if it were the coffee we have now, I probably would have been a lot better off for it. But I have to wonder what that did for me overall. I'm happy that I've done every other, I shouldn't say every other thing, but let's say 96+% of things right, 96% of the time. So I got by with it. But if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it different. I'd get some good sleep. How about you? I mean, how do you do with poor sleep?
I don't at all. I'm an angry bear when I don't get enough sleep. And I'll understand. I'll have to literally say an internal lullaby to myself if I have to cut my sleep for any particular reason or day, but I'll have to promise myself that I will aim to recover that sleep immediately. So if I have to, for whatever reason, I have to pull a 5-hour sleep or something along the lines of that, I know it's going to take me around 4 days to recoup that minimum. So I'll need to probably sleep 9 hours for the next 4 nights in order to get fully jazzed up and ready to rock and roll. Today, I even had a power nap that I needed. And it was absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. It's exactly what I needed just to get myself back in the game, because I have to. I just don't function well, and I get crabby, and I don't get very. I don't produce great things, and I can be honest with that. And I actually was listening to this gentleman's podcast here over the last couple of days, just learning more about sleep, and I'll certainly be getting stuck into more of his material. But he said something as well about lack of sleep. Something on I think it was a TED Talk where he talked. The first thing he shared was, if you're getting suboptimal sleep, or you're not getting enough REM sleep, you're going to have a much lower testosterone count, and your testicle size and quality is going to be that of someone 10 years your senior. So I thought, testosterones and testicles, TT. All right, isn't that interesting? That's the half the audience straight away was like, oh, well, if I want better testosterone and I want better functioning testicles, then I had better get my good night's sleep and be consistent with that. So it's burned into my subconscious now.
Well, let's even take that a step further, Eric. I mean, one, there's so many enemies of testosterone out there right now. So if you live in the US, you're going to see all these ads on TV for erection dysfunction, for testosterone, for clinics, for male infertility. And people don't think about that. But I think here's the worst part of that. It comes on over time. People take on bad habits. They eat inappropriately. They gain body fat. That is certainly the enemy of testosterone. That makes them more stressed. That's the enemy of testosterone. Then their testicles shrivel up. They're not making testosterone. Their relationships start going south. And they think, okay, how do I solve this? And a lot of them want an injection of testosterone thinking that's going to solve it. And Poliquin said this: it ought to be illegal to give a guy testosterone when he's fat, because he's going to make estrogen out of that. So what's the solution? Make sleep a priority. And then a practical anecdote. I had a patient, an internationally recognized, powerful businessman, and he's in great shape and great health. And, I always like to ask my patients, hey, what's your secret? How have you achieved so much? And he said, Bob, I never miss a good night's sleep. And when I need a nap, I take one. He says, in fact, I took, like you said, I took a power nap today, even before I got in here. I got to tell you, I feel brand new. So I found that out, again, the hard way, by not getting good sleep. But, for the last many decades, as soon as I studied sleep, I said, okay, it will be a priority for me. every day. And how often do I not prioritize it? I'm going to say never, but once in a blue moon, I miss my schedule. And I'll tell you what, I pay for it the next day. You said you're an angry bear. One of my mentors said we all wake up as tall 2-year-olds if we don't have a good night's sleep. So
Yeah, no, I know what that's like, and it's not pretty. So it's something that we have to work on. It has to be a priority, you know. And yeah, I used to work nights as well, and we were talking about circadian rhythm later on, but that used to leave me in such a heavy state. It really did. The only good thing about working nights is it introduced me to my amazing wife, Isa.
oh, there you
You
go.
know, so it was worth all the struggle of my sleep and driving home late at night and all that craziness. But it really threw me out of whack.
Well,
Really,
let's
really
go with
did.
that night work. You were actually protecting people, right? Because bad characters tend to go out at night, and you were the hired bodyguard, bouncer, security. And you know, we look at how gorgeous Issa is. It wouldn't be a surprise that she would attract attention of all sorts, even undesirable. So I think it was you just being kind and just a hero. I mean, you're a superhero, and legitimately. So yeah, that's, you know what, everything for a purpose, and it couldn't be better, right? If you got that grand prize, you won the lifetime lottery. So well done. Worth it in that case. I'd do without sleep. I didn't
there
have to
we
meet
go.
Kelly in the middle of the night, but you know, I'm
Yeah,
blessed that way too. But good for you.
you gave me a great idea for a fun reels as well. So thank you for that. When you said
Okay.
bodyguard, so new one coming up to educate and entertain. But just take it back to sleep loss and some of the deprivation as well. I think this is some of the interesting points here as well about hunger and our insulin levels. Could you talk about some of those as well, Dr. Bob, and what the impact is on those aspects of lack of sleep?
Sure. So recall, if you're not running on rest and recovery, you're running on stress hormones. All the stress hormones oppose the action of insulin, and so you're not getting the nutrients into your cells, and you're not having satiety, and you're always hungry, and it's not a good hunger. You know, that stressed hunger, that tired hunger. You want something that's going to give you quick energy. And by the way, that's rarely a healthy choice. Now you can get it. You can have a little bit of honey. You can have a good piece of fruit. You can have something that'll bounce you back pretty quick. But reality is, if you are sleeping deep, you should wake up with better metabolism, better immune system, better everything. And if you're not, you're already in the hole. And so I actually had a patient that he wrote a book. He said he was a best-selling author, not a best writing author, but it was called How to Lose Fat in Your Sleep. And it was really prioritize sleep such that you get deep sleep and you like really calm, relaxing herbs, many of which we use, melatonin, theanine, things like that, good forms of magnesium. And, you know, he got the idea because he started taking a sleep potion that worked well for him, and he started losing weight. And then his wife started losing weight. He said, what's this all about? So he wrote a book about it, made a fortune on that. I hope people got the message. You know, everything gets better. Including appetite regulation, blood sugar regulation, immune system, body composition, energy, recovery. You know, everything is to love about a good night's sleep, and there's nothing to love about a poor night's sleep.
Yeah, you know, it's a good tip as well when you talk about framing things for people, you know, and it's selling the result, not the process, you know, and understanding that people are people, and sometimes if we articulate things in the way we feel is important, it doesn't land necessarily on an audience or someone you may be speaking to. So I find it's always very useful to understand truly what the person wants that you're speaking to, and then bringing the sleep component in to be absolutely of high priority. Otherwise, it becomes filler information. It kind of goes over someone's head, I believe, you know, and finding that deeper want. And I'm sure when you're in your clinic over the years, Dr. Bob, you've had varying degrees of what people want or say they want. And there's time for tough love and there's time for directness for people. But this seems to be a universal principle that you can never get away from, that it has to be dialed down. Otherwise, all of those great things that the body naturally designed to do just starts to pare away and break down. So it's not a fun situation. Any comment on that before we move on?
Well, yeah, you know, Matthew Walker, and you had his slide and his book, Why We Sleep. I mean, it's a masterpiece, and it's amazing that you could spend so much asking that question. Every species sleeps. They used to think sharks didn't because they'd have their eyes open. Well, they don't have eyelids, but they actually put electrodes on them. It's amazing. They'll sleep with half their brain at a time. And birds
Oh.
can do that. And even soldiers in an unfamiliar circumstance, they've actually trained themselves to sleep with half their brain at a time. But reality is it's not optional. And here's a quote that Matthew Walker said: the probability of you staying healthy on less than 6 hours a night sleep consistently is the same as you being struck by lightning. I mean, it's a very rare person that can get by with less than that. There's a few people that get struck by lightning, and some survive, but I wouldn't mess with it. I wouldn't play the odds. That's for sure.
No, certainly not. So we've talked about some of the ideas around the problems associated with lack of sleep, but let's take it back to the root cause. You're an expert in root cause, Dr. Bob. So let's look at some of the issues then with or some of the causes then that can trigger us to have a less than optimal recovery, and of course less than optimal sleep, because especially with the likes of athletes that come into you, Dr. Bob, they need to be on top of their game 10 points out of 10 for their season. So this has to be dialed in. So what are some of the things you scratch off the list? Obviously, sleep deprivation, first of all, if you're cutting corners, is a big no-no, and stress to begin with.
Yeah. And so it's fascinating. You've got a graphic for those that are on the Facebook page, but interestingly enough, they talk about lack of both vitamins and minerals and lack of omega-3. Why they just minimize to those two, I don't know. Because let's face it, it suggests that everybody walking around is deficient in at least one mineral or vitamin, maybe more. And omega-3 is a global deficiency. You don't process stress very well, but it's going to be all of it. We're going to get to the Magnificent Seven later. But you've got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every single day. And when it comes to eat right, stop eating 3 hours before bed. Stop drinking 2 hours before bed. Shut off anything blue light, which we'll get to later, before bed. And all that's part of a routine that makes a difference. But here's the deal. Everything counts. And you want to be consistent. And really, that is the number one thing that Matthew Walker talked about. He says you want to be very consistent about your sleep hygiene, your sleep routine, your sleep schedule, everything about it. And that's when you can be most successful. And let's go with Bruce Lee. He said consistency trumps intensity. And you even said that yourself. I get a bad night. It takes me 4 nights to recover. Well, why not just get 4 straight good nights leading to 4 great days and 4 optimal days? You have a graphic on there for people that are part of the Facebook group. This was a military study. Of all things, military. Why would you do this to the military? They had them less than 6 hours of sleep for 6 straight days. And their performance degraded to that level as if they were legally drunk. And when I first taught that at a seminar, I said, you've got to be kidding me. We don't want legal drunks walking around with the highest powered weapons in the most delicate of circumstances. That's not a good combination.
No, it seems ludicrous, really. I understand the principle. I've heard about BUDS, the SEALs training, and the harrowing tests that they go through over 36 or is it 30 hours, 36 hours or something like that with no sleep. So you're wondering, okay, what's possible for you to achieve in a high stress circumstance, but what's the cost of that? I mean, and obviously if you're going into a combat situation, you want to be all systems a go and aware of what's going on, because your threat assessment, I'm sure, is going to be at a whole other level as well. And I love what, what's the gent, former Navy SEAL, I believe he was as well.
Jocko Willink,
Jocko Willink,
yeah.
Yeah, Jocko Willink, when he talks about his ability to respond under high stress circumstance, of course, it being related back to sleep, but just breath and just awareness of your own self and a soft focus and awareness on what is going on around you. And we can start to see with poorer sleep, that window of peripheral insight and emotional intelligence seems to get narrower and narrower. So it is a dangerous game you're playing if you're underslept for many reasons, especially if you've got a firearm or you're in any law enforcement environment. You have got to have your emotional steadiness in place. Otherwise, someone's getting shot potentially on your shift if you're, so we don't want those things to happen. But you hear about those cases all the time. And there was a number of undercover videos as well, definitely in the States, just where cops arresting undercover FBI agents, and you see that cops are losing their integrity, they're losing their control, and they're not seeing the full picture of what's going on. So probably underslept, overstimulated, poor diet. I mean, these guys didn't look like they're in particularly great shape. They looked a bit heavy and stodgy, and all of these things really will play a big role in the outcome of especially when you're dealing with conflict.
Well, one, we need to take great care of our police officers, and maybe we need higher standards. I have no idea why some bozos thought it'd be a good idea. If you want to make the world better, defund the police, right? That was something going on in the U.S. And they want crime. That people that are shouting for that want crime. What I want is overfund the police. I want the most qualified people in the history of the planet serving and protecting. And that would be true of our military as well. So like you said, that 36 hours, no sleep deprivation, I forget which SEAL audio I was listening to, but over the course of a week, or maybe it's 5 days, but it might be a week, they only get 4 hours of sleep for that entire long stint. And, I do understand that people need to really be ready for anything. But once they get past that, I hope that that's never, ever, ever done again. And people do not die in training. There are training accidents. There was one time way back when I can go back 30 something years ago when the Navy SEALs weren't that popular. I had a friend whose brother was training for that, and he got hurt so badly he couldn't finish his training. And the stat back then, and hard to verify this, but he said about 25% of the people had such a severe injury or even died that was their weed out. Plenty of people got weeded out because they couldn't survive the training. Yeah, I mean, and who knows if it was their fault that they got hurt? Someone else might have hurt them. I mean, there's this thing called friendly fire and everything else. And look out, right? We want to. If I'm going to put in a vote for anything, it's take really good care of everybody, but especially those that take care of us.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge duty of care there. I actually went back on the slides there, Dr. Bob, but this is really what I was looking to muster out was some of the other causes then of impact negatively on our sleep, which of course we've talked about stress, the impact of that, inflammation, and of course, which is we're being stimulated with right now is blue light. Can you just talk about some of, obviously the inflammatory process is something that's going on all the time. So we need to be on top of that. Otherwise it will upset our sleep. Can you just talk how the inflammatory process actually reduces our sleep quality? Is it through discomfort at night? Is it through the inflammation on the brain that impacts upon the nervous system? What's happening there? And then of course, blue light as well.
Sure. Well, the inflammation, when you start looking at it, when it gets out of control, the body's burning up, and that's not a good thing. It literally means fire within. And there's a lot of different ways that we buffer the inflammatory process. And if I go to very basics, inflammation is caused by trauma, toxicity, nutrient insufficiency. Some of us traumatize ourselves, right? And we need to be controlled about that. I saw you had a live where you let your head go too far forward. You're a guy that could take on the world. You could get in a ring with the best of the best, but what hurts you? Putting your head too far forward for too long. So it doesn't have to be the kind of trauma where, something, a tree fell on you or something like that. You can traumatize yourself with posture. But when the body's inflamed, one of its ways of buffering it is with the chronic stress hormone cortisol. And that prevents calming brain chemistry. It prevents deep sleep. It prevents metabolism. And not only does it prevent sleep, but it's one of the worst things that happens in a sleep deprived state. So it almost becomes feed forward. We're looking at a picture, that girl is looking at her blue screen. I think that's what it's trying to look at. Not a good idea, right? We want an electronic sunset, no screens, or if you have to do it, there's actually, like the iPhone, you have a nighttime setting on it. Where it blocks blue light. Mine goes on at 12:01 a.m. and goes off at 12 p.m. And that means it's on for 23 hours, 59 minutes. If I could set it for 24, I would. But that 1 minute, I'm not looking at my phone. I promise you that. And my screen has a blue blocker and things like that. But you see a gentleman looking at medications. And here's the sad reality: if you live in this part of the world, by the time you're 60, the typical 60-year-old's taking 5 different drugs. you have to wonder how many of those were related to too much stress, not enough sleep. And the downside of that, it can cause diabetes. It can cause blood pressure issues. It can cause immune issues. At the extreme, it's associated with cancer and things like that. And there's plenty of studies that show that. So, what do we need to do? We need to make a priority and not just sleep. That's a good starting point, but really everything related to it, which is everything related to our life.
Absolutely. And I saw this stress circle as well here.
Yeah.
Everything's is cyclical, right? We're going to talk about circadian rhythms in a moment, but this stress cycle here, then when it comes to cortisol, this is something that seems to just compound with people. Either they're getting on top of this or they're not, or it's getting on top of them. What's the role then, or the impact with cortisol and sleep?
Cortisol is going to prevent your body from making calm chemistry. It's going to block GABA. It's going to block melatonin. And later on, we might have a graph where we show blue light and the melatonin cortisol ratio, but they're inversely related. When cortisol is high, melatonin is low. Melatonin is what makes us or allows us to sleep. It also has 10 different anti-cancer properties and things like that. There's so many things related to it. But cortisol follows the acute stress hormones. And when your body's in fight or flight, hey, that's not rest, digest, procreate, sleep. It's none of that. It's let me get energy to do something very aggressive now. And reality is, most people that are in fight or flight are not fighting or fleeing, but they're beating up their body from the inside. And for far too many people, I won't want to say it's 24/7, but my God, it seems like it's, 16, 18, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And these people come in as train wrecks and they want to know what to do. Well, let's break that stress pattern. Let's get you some good sleep. They want a magic pill. Well, there's no magic pill that could ever take over what sleep brings. And what are the big three? Sleep, exercise, meditation. You get those three, get your mind right, get your body right, get your rest and recovery right. You're going to have a good life.
Absolutely. I see this. This is the slide I think you're referring to here, Dr. Bob, in regards to the blue light.
Yep. Well, and the cortisol melatonin rhythm, as cortisol rises, melatonin falls. As melatonin rises, at its peak, cortisol should fall, even though they are showing that 8 a.m. cortisol, which is a slightly different rhythm. But throughout the day, melatonin does suppress cortisol. And 20 years ago, they wanted to figure out how that happens. So they actually realized that the adrenal glands themselves have melatonin receptors and they block the brain drive of stress on the adrenal glands, which protects the body. So I'm a big fan of dosing melatonin. And by the way, sometimes every waking hour. And you'd be surprised. People think they're going to fall asleep. Melatonin that's made in the body shouldn't cross the blood-brain barrier. Our gut makes 400 times that as the brain has. So, our bodies are absolutely amazing and melatonin can serve us, but we want to buffer that cortisol, get that sleep, get rid of the blue light, be nourished, do all the things we need to do.
Beautiful. We have a checklist towards the end of this call as well, guys, around an evening routine that you can start to include. And if you want to see some of the visuals of what we're talking about here, guys, you need to be added to our health community, our exclusive health community on Facebook. Drop us a DM saying add me and we can do that for you. But I'd love to get some clarity on circadian rhythms, Dr. Bob. What is the circadian rhythm and how does that impact upon our health and our sleep cycle?
Well, one, everything in nature is a rhythm, whether you're talking about winter, spring, summer, fall, whether we're talking night, day, whether we're talking high tide, low tide, whether you're talking the female monthly cycle, which should be very, very, very rhythmic. We know that we live in a rhythmic universe. Everything is cycles. And in fact, they even call it one of the universal laws. So that circadian rhythm is the ideal body rhythm. They even call ultradian rhythms, where the body within a very short period of time actually has different rhythms and different cycles. And even, I don't know why I was getting phones that was kicking in on my Instagram live. Sorry there. But when we honor our cycle, when we honor our rhythm, and later on, we have a slide that goes into that in detail. They used to think that it was really just night and day that would make the big difference there. And then someone had the same question that I had. There's parts of the world, whether you're talking Alaska, Sweden, those northern areas, and the far south too, they're going to have 40 days of direct daylight and 40 days of darkness. And if you're relying on that for your rhythm, you're going to be in trouble because Mother Nature's playing a little trick. But they found out that actually physical movement was more of a regulator of circadian rhythm. You wake up, you should wake up refreshed, you should start moving. And then maybe the final hour or so of the day, preferably two. And it depends on how aggressive you are. There was a time where I was taking classes where I was training at 7 o'clock at night. I finally had to stop it. It was just too disruptive to my sleep routine. Some people can do that. I certainly couldn't. But when you start looking at movement, light, day, most people's bowel has a rhythm. Certainly their hormones have a rhythm. Their sleep has a rhythm. Their digestion has a rhythm. When it comes to digestion, by the way, we can control that a bit, right? We can actually do things like intermittent fasting and learn to establish a new rhythm. So, and that's probably how humans were throughout the ages. But we're rhythmic, cyclical creatures, probably in every aspect of our life.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think the rhythm of, I should use the overuse of the word rhythm, but it really helps you to keep in check. And I think that's the thing, whether it's the military, whether it's music, whether it's movement, there is a natural rhythm, I believe, to every element of our lives. And it's a matter of getting in check with that. I'm really listening. And you know what, it's interesting. You mentioned about training in the evenings. It's rare. I'll do an evening session today, but it's rare I would train into the evenings because I find that it excites the nervous system too much. Well, depending on what you do, if it's more energy building and relaxation, but the likelihood of you doing a high intensity, high powered, high effort session in the evening and then having a restful sleep on time starts to become a little bit contradictory in that regard. I'm sure you probably advise your athletes, Dr. Bob, to train morning or afternoon over their careers, I would assume.
Well, they want to be consistent with it, but here's the interesting thing. When I was working with Evander Holyfield, I mean, he had such great coaches. When he would fight in Vegas, that was the most common place. They would actually train, which would be fight time, which was about midnight, Houston, Texas. So he shifted his whole routine. He didn't go into sleep deprivation. He just changed everything where his sleep would be 3 a.m. to noon, and then, by the way, if he'd fight in Europe, he'd get there 10 days in advance. If he'd get in Vegas, he'd get there, several days in advance to re-equilibrate to actually the energy of the space, because their Earth does have energy, and that has a lot to do with time zone rhythm. But athletes with good coaching and good planning, they can work around that. And then you start looking at the stats. When there's an NFL team that travels from west to east to compete, normally that messes up the sleep schedule. They have a higher losing percentage, than going the other direction, all other things equal. So guess what? Sleep is indisputably a factor for performance at every level, and especially the highest level. In fact, I would suggest the highest level would be most compromised by sleep deprivation.
Absolutely. I just, the whole travel thing for fighting and outside of time zones as well. You hear that oftentimes with different sports players, that they land too close to their game time, so that they're very much affected by the time difference. And Vegas is a huge leap. I remember the last time I was in Vegas, there was something like a 9-hour time gap. So it was you're already in a very unique town, a part of the world, but then you're adjusting to the time. It can be very disorientating. And the last thing I really wanted to do, although I did it because it really shook me up, was to get in and do a training session. But I felt I really needed it to realign my system in that regard. But just speaking about REM sleep, Dr. Bob, that doctor was speaking very, very powerfully around REM sleep and the connection between your quality or consistency of REM sleep and your overall vitality and mortality. What is REM sleep, Dr. Bob, and what is the significance of having it in our routine?
Well, one, it actually stands for rapid eye movement, which is so fascinating. If you ever see anybody in their REM sleep, you can look and you can actually see from the outside, the eyes are just darting back and forth. I remember the first time I saw that, before I was well trained, I was probably a kid. I thought, what the heck is going on here? This person's eyes are going crazy. That doesn't make any sense. But there's so many things that happen during REM sleep where it's absolutely a critical part of the cycle. I find it fascinating. I wear an Oura ring and it tracks my REM sleep. It knows exactly how much I've had and the light and the deeper phases. And Interestingly enough, that's going to be more deep. That's going to be more restorative. And that's going to be really, really critical for establishing good neural pathways, establishing memory recall. But it's also those deeper phases of sleep where now we know that the brain has its own detoxification system. It goes through detox. They call it the glymphatic system. The glial cells are cleaning that brain out. And so sleep, without it, if you don't clean out your brain, and in fact, this is one word, I don't know who came up with that. I don't think it was Matthew Walker, but he called sleep mental floss as opposed to dental floss. And you think about it, if you know someone that doesn't floss their teeth, they're decay waiting to happen, if you don't floss your mind, same thing, decay is waiting to happen. So get that good sleep, get that REM sleep. And things that interfere with it, by the way, things like alcohol. People think, well, I'll take a little drink, I'll go to sleep. It messes up your sleep stages. It messes up the REM sleep. It may, check your cortex out a bit, but your body does not respond the same. So, if you're going to get good sleep, we have nice natural herbs that can help with that, but stay away from the harsh stuff. And Matthew Walker even talked about sleeping pills. Do people get sleep with it? Yeah. Is it quality? No way. It's just not. So you want to honor the natural systems that keep us, help us sleep and help us wake up.
Speaking about helping me sleep, the sun is saying goodbye here because we had the hour shift. So normally I wouldn't have this, but how beautiful and powerful that is. And just a reminder that the day is coming to a somewhat end, which is beautiful, but something powerful in that as well. Just talking about realigning yourself and circadian rhythms and really centering yourself. I learned a long time ago about the benefits of doing gentler exercise, either at sunrise or at sunset, because of the level of ions in the air, but also the charge that we can get from the sun as it's leaving and as it's arriving. Just thought for you guys, if you wanted to experiment doing some more gentler work outside, then do it at sunset or sunrise for you to really connect with yourself. And of course, barefoot on the grass, ideally on the earth, is definitely a great way to go. But taking it back to your clinic, Dr. Bob, over the years, you've talked about the Magnificent Seven. What are some of the aligned practices or strategies you use then to improve sleep, to improve recovery, alongside of what we've currently mentioned? So if you just want to share just off the top of your head, some of the things you allow or really kind of hone down with your athletes and general patients, and anything additionally that we haven't maybe mentioned already.
Well, the athletes might be a little different in some ways, but because some of them are so anabolic, they are training so hard that, I mean, the amount of food they put in their body. I had breakfast with some NFL players, and oh my gosh, they were eating 6,000 calories a day. And I asked them, I said, do you always eat like this? They said, if I don't, I waste away. So when you're a 250 or 300 pound guy with rock solid muscle, you need 6,000 calories. But most of us, what I'm recommending eating right is eating light in a shorter window, and especially away from sleep. The closer you eat towards sleep, the more you're going to interfere with brain cleansing, with brain detoxification, with deep sleep. Drinking, I wouldn't do anything stimulating at bed like caffeine. But with that said, there's something called the adenosine hypothesis, and they even call something a napitation, or even like a nappuccino. They'll talk about a coffee before a nap. You may actually get a little deeper sleep if you coffee right before, but it's not going to be good for a long night. So I don't like people having neither stimulants or strong sedatives like alcohol before bed, like a calming tea. Our red tea is quite good. Green tea, even though it has a little caffeine, it's got the theanine in it. And then we can talk about reishi, the superfood, later. But that's what's proven. People that consume that fall asleep faster, sleep deeper, longer, wake up more refreshed. That's right in the peer-reviewed literature. And by the way, ours is infused in coffee and tea, which is interesting, right? So we have people that they'll drink a coffee at midnight and get good sleep. That doesn't work for me. I don't clear the caffeine that fast. But I would encourage you, one, don't drink coffee at midnight. But if you do, make sure it's reishi infused, because then you're going to buffer that caffeine effect. Talking right, cell-to-cell communication under stress. Hey, your body's in alarm state. Nothing's talking right. You're only thinking about fight or flight. So get that stress calm. Think right, and prioritize all of your health, realizing that sleep may well be number one. Moving right, you want to move, but gentle at the beginning, gentle at the end. If you want to go ballistic, do that in the middle of the day. I like people to, if they're going to train hard, at least 4 hours before bed, and preferably longer than that. Poop right, detoxify. I'm going to take that a little different way. If you're not getting good sleep, your brain is not pooping right. You're not getting that mental floss. Prioritize that. I have plenty of people that'll start coming in and they'll say, my memory's starting to slip. I had a guy in yesterday, a brilliant guy, West Point grad. He says, I don't know why, but my memory's slipping. Guess what? He wasn't sleeping like he should, right? And that's the first place we're going to go with that. And then sleep right, well, that ties it all together. How much do you need? Well, here's what I'd like people to do. When you go to bed, you fall asleep. Some people, the moment their head hits the pillow, God bless them, how amazing is that? Me, I actually, with soft light, are going to read something, usually for about 15 minutes. Then I close my eyes and maybe listen to a meditation in the background. I go to sleep. But you want to fall asleep, sleep through the night, and wake up refreshed, ready to take on the world without an alarm. And Eric, now they even have sleep trackers where it can tell what phase of sleep you're in. Huberman, he's got a great podcast. You sent me one of them. He says, look, you might be better off missing the final hour of sleep rather than waking up in the middle of a deep phase, because then you might feel, way out of it. Well, I would say prioritize your days in life so that you can get through that final deep cycle and wake up okay. And there are alarm clocks now that'll read what's going on in your body, and it'll have a window of maybe 30 minutes where you've got to organize your life to buffer that. But I'll tell you what, one of the best things that I ever made a decision to was have an unwavering commitment to sleep. And I would encourage everybody to do that because it literally is that important.
Yeah, and it's in 90-minute cycles, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Bob, isn't it? That you shouldn't wake up within a 90-minute range. So if you're ideally getting to bed within those 8 hours, don't get up between that 90-minute slot, because then you're probably dragging your heels and just not feeling like you've done yourself that justice. So is that accurate that you would try and time it? That
well, there's some level of variability there, but we're mostly consistent. I would encourage people, if they've never done it, get a sleep tracker, whether it's a Whoop, whether it's a Fitbit. These things are all halfway decent. I happen to like the Oura Ring. I think it's got the best sleep tracker. You're going to find that when people do it, they are going to have consistent patterns. And so will everybody be 90 minutes? No, but it's probably, 90 plus or minus 15 or 20. And that's why instead of going on the clock, you go on the body. And by the way, that's one of the things that you do really, really magically. You always say, hey, let's ask our body for permission to do this. And, hopefully the answer is yes. But if it's not, we don't go against what the body wants. Same thing with sleep. And if you're tracking it with that kind of alarm clock, if sleep is an issue for you, make the investment in a sleep tracker and maybe an alarm where it can not wake you up at the phase, which is going to mess up your day.
Love that. Some things that I found quite useful, I've come across. I haven't tried the grounding mat yet. I don't know if you have.
I have. I have grounding sheets. I have a grounding pillowcase. I ground with the earth on a regular basis. Yep. There's something to it. There is something to it. You bet.
And really, the idea being that it's drawing those electrodes out of the body that's kind of going to stimulate you in your sleep. We pick up during the day. Would that be kind of on the money, Dr. Bob, that it's just taking that electrical charge out of the system that's going to stimulate you rather than just let you to go into a restful sleep?
Well, it's taking things out and it's putting things in, believe it or not. There's a trade. So I listened to Gary Brecka talk about earthing, and I'd been aware of earthing for a while, and I didn't understand the science before it. And it was one of his top 5. And I thought, okay, what is it about this? Well, we have this law of electrical neutrality where in the universe, positive and negative charges equal out, but the distribution doesn't. The Earth's surface is very negatively charged. And electrons, our life, it's the movement of electrons that really drive everything. And so when you're barefoot on the earth or even on a grounding mat, you're actually getting electrons. And if we think about what an antioxidant is, it's an electron donor. It actually gives life back to the body, anti-aging. Could you get too much? Well, under artificial circumstances, you could. But these grounding mats, they're actually plugged into the grounding part of the electrical outlet, which is grounded to the earth. So the mats, they're more natural than you would believe, but nothing's better than Mother Earth. And then where are the best places? Well, you're there. Mountains and seashore ionize the environment to a much greater level. And that's why the world likes to vacation there. And a big portion of the world lives there. You just feel better when you're there.
That's why Teddy maybe pulls me towards the sand every time we're going for a pee break. But something else as well, the Wi-Fi, these are emitting EMFs, which can disturb sleep as well. So guys, knock off your Wi-Fi, knock off your phones, turn off the technology, close the blinds, don't have any lights flickering in the room, because that can also trigger cortisol response in the system. And of course, the blue light. Go ahead, Dr. Bob. I know you want to add something there.
No, go for it. Keep going.
No. I was just going to say blue light as well. We mentioned that already, the impact that has. So just get into that habit of, there is a time, set an alarm. You're not going to interfere with your phone right before sleep. And worst case scenario is if you see something and it stimulates you, or you see something stressful, it's going to impact your sleep. So turn it off and deal with that tomorrow if you have to. And this is something physically I love to do. I was just doing this earlier on here, actually, for a pick, is to lay in semi-supine on the ground. It allows the whole structure of the spine to elongate and be as flat as possible, preparing you for sleep. And just enjoy breathing, deep belly breath, rippling from the diaphragm to the chest for about 5 minutes before sleep. I think it's probably one of the best things to do physically before you go to sleep, is just to allow everything to relax and for you to check in as to where is tense. I would sometimes even follow this up with a stretch, multiple body parts of a stretch, because laying in this position gives me a signaler that, I'm particularly tight on my low back, I'm particularly tight on my neck, shoulders, whatever it may be. And I will give that an extra bit of stretch before sleep, because you lay down and you're a little bit knotted, nothing worse, because you're trying to move away from the pain, you're trying to adjust it. But if you get a stretch before sleep, make this alignment a priority, I think you're going to have a better rest as well.
I want to point some things out about that. If you don't look closely, you don't realize that his hips are internally rotated, and that's what a lot of people have challenge with. So he's getting those hips nicely internally rotated. That's going to be a stretch to the external rotators, which cause more tension than most people even begin to realize. You're also then pulling across, you're opening up that back. You're going to breathe a whole lot deeper. Your head is sitting there. Your neck is going to sink into the floor. A long spine is a strong spine. If you break this down, this which seems so simple, the value for some could be the difference between a long, healthy life and one that has something not so good around the corner. So these little things add up. They make a difference. The compounding effect is real. And that's what we're all about. How many things can you do to make your life better? Well, I promise you hang out with Eric and people like that, you're going to find out that there's a bunch of little things that really can take your game to the next level.
Absolutely, guys. And on that point, if you haven't seen about our Warrior 30 challenge, we combine functional medicine, functional movement, and mindset in a program for you guys, whether pain is a challenge, whether you're time restricted, or if you're just finding you're getting those plateaus in your training, please ask about that. We've got together with Dr. Bob's skill set and Coach Sasha as well to create something really cool for you guys to experiment with on your health and fitness journey. But let's talk about the combination of your stress reset, Dr. Bob. Why has the combo of L-theanine, Reishi spores particularly, and melatonin been such a winning combo for not only sleep, but recovery as well as overall well-being?
Yeah, well, there's going to be three different mechanisms. Theanine calms the mind. It's a GABA facilitator. It creates this calmness without creating drowsiness. That's a big part of that. You start looking at melatonin. Some people think they take melatonin, they might fall asleep. No. If melatonin crosses the blood-brain barrier, you're in trouble, right? Because you have a leaky brain. Interestingly enough, the melatonin is going to help with that. And what it'll do is it'll actually bind to the adrenal glands and prevent the brain trying to have stress. And then we've got Ganoderma, also known as Reishi, that will actually lower the amount of cortisol in the bloodstream. It's a natural GABA facilitator, number of other brain benefits, and they actually call it the herb of spiritual potency. And you start looking at that, and it was really, I hadn't found anything that had the medical literature that said it was good for the spirit. So I thought, I'm all about the body, mind, and spirit. Let's combine these three. And Eric, this might be the most powerful combination and the most universally needed that I've seen in clinical practice. And then you fast forward, Camilla Hiller, I've told her story many, many times, but, beautiful woman from Sweden who was literally approaching death at a very rapid rate. She had gastric bypass surgery a decade earlier, and she'd literally been starving to death for a decade. And she literally was, she was, approaching liver failure, kidney failure, inflamed, anemic. I thought, oh my God, what can I do for this woman? Realizing she didn't even have an intact digestive system, I thought, well, let's pull the plug on stress. We did the stress reset. It gave her life back. And she said, you know what, we need to take this to the world, but it has to be easier. With the type of surgery she had to crush capsules, crush tablets, open capsules. Why not put it all in one? So it's almost there. The stress reset, the stress release for some of Europe that doesn't have melatonin. GABA is a really good substitute, but this is powerful. And you know what? I like it every waking hour. Why? Because bodies respond to frequency, duration, intensity, quality, and timing of stimuli. And when you put in these good therapeutic nutrients, people are going to get a change. There's no doubt about it. And for some, they think it's the best thing they've ever done. And, that's powerful.
Beautiful. And, we've talked about caffeine earlier, and that can be very problematic for people. But I'd love you to talk about the concept our partners come up with, which was infusing reishi, organic reishi, the purest form of this medicinal mushroom, inside of coffee and tea, in a way that helps to buffer some of those the negatives of caffeine. Can you just talk about how that can play out for some people and can be a game changer if they love to have caffeine at all times during the day?
Sure. We mentioned the deal with sleep. People that consume ganoderma will fall asleep faster, sleep deeper, longer, wake up more refreshed. So they don't have that problem with coffee keeping them awake. But it's also a powerful anti-inflammatory. It's alkaline. It creates calming stress, happy stress, better focus. It's great for the immune system. It's a powerful anti-aging molecule, and you go on and on and on. There's over 3,500 published studies, over 5,000 years of clinical use. And one of my great mentors, more than 3 decades ago, gave me a book called Reishi, King of Herbs. He said, get this into your patients any way that you can. It's the most powerful natural medicine I've ever found. And this was a very successful doctor who was very wise. And what better way to do it, but then to put the health in the habit, right? Whether it's coffee or tea. The world consumes 2.25 billion cups of coffee a day, about the same as tea. What if that was every sip turbocharged your body, mind, and spirit? And that's what we get. And then you're showing a picture of the royal for those that are on in the Facebook community with us. But reishi, top superfood on the planet. Second place isn't even close. Cordyceps, that's going to be the number 2 medicinal mushroom. Phenomenally good for oxygen, for the brain, for endurance, testosterone, cortisol ratio. And then we've got lion's mane, which is like pure focus fast. I've even had people that were taking medication for focus. They throw it away after their first cup of royal because they say, oh my God, why do I need a drug when this does more for my brain in a better way? And I wonder if more people would ask that question, right? We're not telling people to throw out their drugs and replace it with this, but hey, if you're doing something healthy for you as opposed to something not, you might be better off, So life is a series of experiments. Maybe your brain's ready for one, and body as well.
Yeah, I find this epic. Combine this with the king. I call it the Reishi royalty experience. This is a pretty epic combo to have for doing any physical activity or any mental activity for that matter. But just to wrap up, Dr. Bob, I know there is a flash sale happening for any of you guys you want to put reishi to the test. This, unfortunately, is only for you guys in US and Canada. So if you're there and you want to maximize on this special offer with the 3 components of reishi, we have the purest on the planet, log grown, not grown in bags. And you get a really nice 12% discount for the next 2 days on either the lucidum, the body, or the root system, the mycelium, or the spores and how it germinates. And we have the purest of pure spores. If you want to just wrap up the call, Dr. Bob, on just telling us about the spores, the why we're so jazzed up about what we have in regards to particularly the spores and its potency.
Yeah, well, the spores are the most potent part of the plant, but that doesn't do you any good if you can't get it into your body. So, our partners have been studying reishi for decades, and they realize that, listen, there's two protective shells around the spore, and for good reason. This needs to last. I tell people if there was another ice age 10,000 years from now, when life started coming back, these mushrooms would probably pop up first because there's enough nutrition, enough antioxidants, enough protection there. So if people are just getting spores, they're probably getting almost none of it. And some companies that offer spores, the highest level that they found of a cracked shell rate in competition was 15%, whereas we have 99.9. So we're 6.5, 7 times stronger than the next best. And by the way, most were 2 to 3% that even had spores. So we might be 50x more potent. And a supplement doesn't do you any good if it doesn't get into your body. Consider if you buy an ineffective spore, you might as well eat sawdust. It's not going to do much for you. But when you get ours, you get the benefit.
There you go. And you know what? This is the thing: is pay for potency, pay for quality, the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak, because you are the greatest investment you could ever make. So with that said, tons of nuggets. Yes, to that person's question on Facebook, this will be available to watch and replay. It's streamed directly into our Facebook group. So guys, call to action on this. If you would like to see the full version of this call with the visual element, please drop either myself or Dr. Bob or on Reishi Warriors an add me message, which will add you to our Facebook community so you can see the elements of some of these technical parts of what we're talking about. But it's very absorbable, pardon the pun. We're talking about high quality spores. But Dr. Bob, great to have you on the call. Thank you so much. I know you've got to shoot. Guys, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section and we will circle back around and address them over the next day or so. So Dr. Bob, thank you so much. Next week, we are back and focusing on men's health, particularly because we want to really address that demographic as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Bob. Thank you, guys. Hope you got lots of nuggets from this call and that you're sleeping like a champion and having that greater level of performance and health. So thank you, Dr. Bob. Thank you, guys. We will see you very, very soon.